The scent of mountain pine and winter frost clung to my clothes as I was escorted through the stone corridors of the Northern Pack's stronghold. Each breath materialized before me in small clouds of vapor that dissipated into the frigid air. My heartbeat thundered in my chest, a wild, erratic rhythm that I feared would betray my terror to the guards flanking me. Their expressions remained impassive, but their nostrils flared occasionally, no doubt catching the sour notes of fear emanating from my skin. I shouldn't have been there. I was human, fragile, disposable. Our kind had maintained an uneasy peace with the werewolf packs for centuries, but territorial violations were still punishable by death. My transgression had been accidental, a wrong turn while hiking that led me across the invisible boundary marking their lands. But intention meant nothing to these creatures of instinct and ancient law. "Keep moving," the larger guard growled, his massive hand pressing against my back with enough force to propel me forward without seeming to exert any effort at all. The weight of my grandmother's silver pendant felt suddenly heavy against my chest. She had given it to me on her deathbed, whispering words I still carried. "Silver protects, dear one, but wisdom saves." I hadn't understood then. I was beginning to now. We passed through an archway, adorned with carvings of wolves in various hunting poses. The temperature dropped further as we entered what could only be described as a throne room. Stone braziers lined the walls, flames dancing and casting long shadows across the floor. At the far end, elevated on a dais of polished black granite, sat a throne fashioned from antlers and dark wood, and on it sat him. Even from a distance, his presence seemed to fill the cavernous space. He was unnaturally still, observing my approach with eyes that glowed amber in the firelight. His shoulders were broad beneath a cloak of midnight fur, his jaw sharp and unyielding. Black hair fell to his shoulders, framing features that seemed carved from marble, beautiful in the way that deadly things often are. The Alpha King. The guards forced me to my knees before him, the stone floor bruising my skin through my thin hiking pants. My blonde hair fell forward, curtaining my face, offering a momentary shield from his penetrating gaze. "Look at me, human," he commanded, his voice deep and resonant. I raised my eyes slowly, fighting every instinct screaming at me to keep my gaze lowered. In the world of wolves, eye contact was a challenge, but averting my eyes completely would mark me as prey. I had to find the balance, to show respect without surrendering my humanity entirely. His expression remained unreadable as he studied me. One hand rested on the arm of his throne, long fingers tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm that echoed in the silence. "You crossed our borders," he stated. Not a question, but a pronouncement of guilt. "I didn't know," I whispered, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. But I knew he could hear me. The trail markers. They must have been moved. I would never intentionally. Silence. The single word sliced through the air. Ignorance of our boundaries is not an excuse we recognize. The penalty is death. A tremor ran through me, and I fought to keep my composure. Death, so final, so absolute, for what amounted to a wrong turn on a hiking trail. The injustice of it burned in my chest, momentarily overpowering my fear. "That's barbaric," I said, immediately regretting the words as they left my lips. A dangerous smile curved his mouth. "We are what we are, human. Civilization is a thin veneer your kind clings to. We acknowledge our nature." He rose from his throne in one fluid motion, descending the steps with predatory grace. Each footfall was silent, despite his imposing size. He circled me slowly, and I fought the urge to turn, to keep him in my sight. The guards stepped back, creating a perimeter that felt more like an arena than a throne room. "You have spirit," he observed, his breath warm against my ear as he leaned close. "Most humans would be begging by now." "Would that help?" I asked, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. A low chuckle rumbled from his chest. "No." He completed his circuit, coming to stand before me once again. His gaze swept over me assessingly, and I felt exposed in ways that had nothing to do with clothing. "There's something different about you," he said, head tilting slightly. "You smell of fear, yes, but something else too. Something familiar." My grandmother's pendant seemed to pulse against my skin, a family heirloom, she'd called it, an ancient protection. "I'm just a hiker," I said, "nothing special." His eyes narrowed. "We shall see." With a gesture, he dismissed the guards. They hesitated, a barely perceptible pause that spoke volumes, before bowing and retreating from the chamber. The massive doors closed behind them with a resonant boom that felt somehow final. We were alone. "Stand," he commanded. I rose on shaky legs, acutely aware of our size difference. He towered over me, his presence making the vast room feel suddenly claustrophobic. "There are alternatives to death," he said, circling me again. Rare exceptions I might grant, if sufficiently intrigued. Hope flickered dangerously in my chest. "What kind of alternatives?" He stopped directly before me, close enough that I could see flecks of gold in his amber eyes, a test of sorts. "One night in my chambers. If you survive until dawn, your life is yours to keep." My breath caught. Survive? What exactly would I be surviving? The smile that spread across his face held no warmth. Me, little human. My presence. My bed. He reached out, one finger tracing the line of my jaw. Most humans cannot endure proximity to an alpha for extended periods. The power we emanate overwhelms your fragile systems. Your hearts give out, your minds break. But if you can withstand it... He shrugged. "Perhaps you deserve to live." My mind raced, searching for options that didn't exist. I was trapped in his territory, surrounded by his pack. There was no escape, no cavalry coming to my rescue. Just this impossible choice that wasn't really a choice at all. "And if I refuse, then your death will be immediate rather than merely probable," he replied with brutal honesty. I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. My grandmother's words echoed again. "Silver protects, but wisdom saves." Was this wisdom? Accepting this deadly bargain? "Very well," I said, opening my eyes to meet his gaze directly. "One night. And if I survive, I walk free. Your word on it." Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or respect. "You have it. My word as Alpha King." He extended his hand, and I hesitated only a moment before placing my much smaller one in his palm. His skin burned hot against mine, the contact sending an unexpected jolt up my arm. "Come," he said, his fingers closing around mine. "Night approaches." He led me through corridors deeper into the stronghold, past curious eyes that watched our progress with expressions ranging from shock to contempt. I held my head high, refusing to be cowed despite the trembling in my limbs. What choice did I have but to face this with whatever dignity I could muster? The Alpha King's chambers were not what I expected. Instead of the barbaric den I had imagined, the space was elegant and spare. Massive windows overlooked snow-covered mountains, the glass somehow keeping the bitter cold at bay. A fire roared in a stone hearth larger than any I had seen. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes whose spines bore titles in languages I couldn't decipher. At the center of it all stood a bed that seemed carved from a single piece of dark wood, draped with furs and linens that looked impossibly soft. "You seem surprised," he observed, releasing my hand and moving to pour something amber-colored into 2 crystal glasses. "I expected something different." "Bones and blood smears?" He offered me one of the glasses. "We're not mindless beasts, despite what your kind believes." I accepted the drink cautiously, sniffing it before taking a small sip. The liquid burned pleasantly down my throat. "Whiskey, expensive and smoky." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Why not just kill me and be done with it?" He studied me over the rim of his glass. "Perhaps I'm bored with the predictable. Perhaps I'm curious about a human who wanders into wolf territory wearing silver and speaking of barbarism to an alpha's face." He set his glass down. "Or perhaps there's something about you that..." He trailed off, his expression darkening momentarily. "That what?" "Nothing," he said dismissively. "Remove your coat. You won't need it here." I hesitated, then slowly unzipped my hiking jacket. Beneath it, I wore a simple thermal top, practical for the mountain climate. As I laid the coat aside, I saw his eyes fix on my grandmother's pendant, now visible against the fabric of my shirt. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice suddenly tense. I touched it instinctively. It was my grandmother's, a family heirloom. He moved toward me with that unnatural speed, suddenly close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His fingers hovered near the pendant without touching it. "This symbol," he said, his voice low. "Do you know what it means?" I shook my head. She never explained it, only that it would protect me. A harsh laugh escaped him. "Protect you?" "Yes, I suppose it might." He stepped back, regarding me with new intensity. "What was your grandmother's name?" "Eleanor," I said. "Eleanor Hayes." The glass in his hand shattered, startling me. Blood and whiskey dripped from his fingers, but he seemed not to notice. "Impossible," he whispered. Before I could respond, a knock sounded at the door. The Alpha King's expression shifted, the vulnerability I'd glimpsed vanishing behind a mask of authority. "Enter," he commanded. A woman appeared, tall and severe, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight braid. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of me, but quickly returned to her Alpha. "My king, the northern delegation has arrived early. They're demanding an audience." He cursed under his breath. "Now is not the time, Celine." "They insist it cannot wait. They speak of border incursions to the east." The tension in the room thickened. I stood forgotten for the moment, watching the silent communication that seemed to pass between them. "Very well," he finally said. "I will meet them." He turned to me, his expression unreadable once more. "You will remain here. Attempt to leave, and our arrangement is void." I nodded, not trusting my voice. He strode to the door, pausing briefly to address the woman called Celine. "She is not to be harmed," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And no one enters this room until my return." Celine bowed her head in acknowledgement, casting one last curious glance at me before following him out. The door closed with a heavy thud, and I heard the distinct click of a lock engaging. Alone in the Alpha King's chambers, I released the breath I'd been holding. My legs gave way, and I sank onto the edge of the massive bed, mind racing. What had my grandmother's pendant meant to him? Why had the mere mention of her name shattered his composure? Outside the windows, darkness began to fall over the mountains, the sky shifting from blue to deepening violet. Night was coming, and with it, the true test of whether I would survive until dawn. I touched the silver pendant, tracing its intricate pattern with my fingertip. For the first time, I wondered if I had been brought to this place not by accident, but by a destiny set in motion long before I was born. Night descended fully beyond the windows, stars appearing one by one against the velvet darkness. I remained perched on the edge of the bed, caught between exhaustion and hypervigilance. Every creak of the stronghold, every distant howl carried on the wind made me flinch. My fingers hadn't left my grandmother's pendant since the Alpha King's departure. The fire crackled in the hearth, shadows dancing across the stone walls. Despite its warmth, a chill had settled deep in my bones, the kind that comes from fear rather than cold. I stood on shaky legs and began to explore the chamber, needing movement to calm my frayed nerves. The bookshelves yielded volumes in languages both familiar and utterly foreign. Some looked ancient, their bindings cracked with age, while others appeared nearly new. I ran my fingers along their spines, pausing at one bound in dark red leather. When I pulled it from the shelf, it fell open to a page marked with a pressed flower, a small blue blossom I didn't recognize. The text was in English, surprisingly, a journal of sorts. 4th moon of winter, year 673. Another human settlement encroaches on the eastern borders. The council urges war, but I counsel patience. Not all humans are enemies. Some remember the old ways, the old bonds. Some still carry ancient blood, though diluted by generations. I think of her sometimes, wondering if... The entry ended abruptly, as if the writer had been interrupted. I closed the book carefully, returning it to its place with a strange reluctance. The intimacy of the words felt like an intrusion, a glimpse into thoughts never meant for my eyes. Moving to the windows, I gazed out at the moonlit mountains. Snow blanketed everything, creating a landscape of silver and shadow. In the distance, dark shapes moved through the trees, wolves on patrol perhaps, or hunting beneath the cold light of the stars. I pressed my palm against the glass, feeling the bite of winter just beyond the pain. Beautiful, isn't it? I whirled around, heart leaping into my throat. The Alpha King stood in the doorway, watching me with those unnerving amber eyes. I hadn't heard the door open. Yes, I stammered, hating the tremor in my voice. The mountains. He moved into the room, shrugging off the heavy cloak from his shoulders and draping it over a chair. Beneath it, he wore a simple black shirt that did little to conceal the power in his frame. I noticed a fresh cut along his jawline, already healing. The meeting didn't go well, I observed, surprising myself with my boldness. His eyes narrowed slightly. Politics rarely does, especially among wolves. He poured himself another drink, not offering me one this time. The Northern Pack believes we've grown soft, too accommodating to humans and their endless expansion. And have you? I asked. A dark smile curved his lips. What do you think, little human? I've given you a chance to live, haven't I? Many would call that weakness. I swallowed hard. Or wisdom. Something flickered in his expression. A recognition, perhaps. He moved toward me, and it took everything I had not to back away. When he reached for my pendant, I flinched involuntarily. May I? He asked, his voice unexpectedly gentle. I nodded, though my pulse raced wildly as his fingers brushed against my collarbone. He lifted the silver pendant, examining it in the firelight. This symbol, he said, is the mark of the Guardians, humans who once lived in harmony with wolves, who protected the secret of our existence from those who would destroy us. His eyes lifted to mine. They were respected, honored even, among the packs. Until the great betrayal. What betrayal? I whispered. He released the pendant, his hand falling away. A story for another time, perhaps. If you survive the night. The reminder of my precarious situation sent a fresh wave of fear through me. I retreated a step, bumping against the window behind me. Don't worry, he said, his voice carrying a hint of something that might have been amusement. I don't intend to devour you, not in the way you fear, at least. Heat rushed to my cheeks at his implication. Then what exactly am I surviving? You said your presence could kill me, and it can. He moved to the fire, stirring the embers with an iron poker. Sparks flew upward, briefly illuminating his profile. An alpha's energy is potent. Most humans cannot bear it for long. Their bodies react as they would to extreme stress. Elevated heart rate, adrenaline surge, eventually system failure. That sounds like murder, not a test, I said, anger momentarily overriding fear. He turned to face me, firelight casting half his face in shadow. It is both, and neither. He set the poker aside. If you're strong enough to endure it, perhaps you're strong enough to deserve life. No one should have to earn the right to live, I said quietly. His expression darkened. In this world, my world, everything is earned. Nothing is given freely. I thought of my life before this moment. My small apartment in the city, my job at the university library, the quiet existence I'd built for myself after my grandmother's death. So ordinary, so safe. How quickly it had all been stripped away, leaving me at the mercy of ancient laws and a predator's whims. You should rest, he said, interrupting my thoughts. The night grows late, and the true test has barely begun. My eyes darted to the bed, the only bed in the chamber, and back to him. Where will you... Beside you, he replied matter-of-factly. That is the test, after all, to endure my proximity until dawn. Panic clawed at my throat. Sharing a bed with this creature, this predator who could tear me apart with his bare hands? I'd expected many things when I was brought to his stronghold, but not this intimate form of torture. I can't, I whispered, hating the weakness in my voice. You can, he countered. And you will, unless you prefer the alternative, death. The word hung unspoken between us. My grandmother's pendant seemed to warm against my skin, a reminder of her strength. She had faced unknowable hardships in her life, whispered stories of escape, of sacrifice, of survival against impossible odds. If she could endure, so could I. Fine, I said, lifting my chin. One night. Something like approval flashed in his eyes. He gestured toward a door I hadn't noticed before. Through there, you'll find what you need." The adjoining room was a bathing chamber, elegant in its simplicity. A large stone tub filled with steaming water awaited, the surface scattered with fragrant herbs. Fresh clothes had been laid out, a simple nightdress of soft material that looked designed for a woman's form. I hesitated, glancing back at the Alpha King, who remained by the fire. "Did you expect company tonight?" His lips twitched. "The garment belonged to no one. It was brought for you." "How considerate," I murmured, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. "Even monsters can show courtesy, little human." I closed the door before he could see my reaction to his words. Alone in the bathing chamber, I allowed myself a moment of weakness, pressing my forehead against the cool stone wall as tears threatened. I had no illusions about my situation. This was not courtesy. It was preparation for sacrifice. The bath, at least, was a momentary respite. I sank into the hot water, letting it ease the ache in my muscles. The herbs released their fragrance as I disturbed them. Lavender and something wilder, earthy. For a brief time I could almost forget where I was, what awaited me beyond the door, but reality could not be avoided forever. I dried myself with the soft towels provided and slipped the nightdress over my head. It fell to my ankles, unexpectedly modest, despite the fine material that suggested it was made for someone of importance. I kept my grandmother's pendant on, its familiar weight a comfort. When I emerged, the chamber was dimmer, lit only by the fire and a few candles. The Alpha King stood at the window now, his back to me, a silhouette against the night sky. He had changed as well, wearing only loose black pants, his torso bare. Even in profile, I could see the scars that marked his skin, evidence of battles fought and survived. "The bath helped your scent," he remarked without turning. "Less fear now." I folded my arms across my chest, feeling exposed despite being fully covered. "I'm still afraid." "Honesty," he said, finally turning to face me. "Rare among your kind." The firelight played across the planes of his chest, highlighting the strength coiled beneath his skin. He was beautiful in the way of dangerous things. A storm, a predator, a force of nature barely contained in human form. "What should I call you?" I asked suddenly. "Everyone refers to you as the Alpha King, but surely you have a name." A shadow passed over his features. "Names have power. They're not given lightly among my kind." "I'm about to spend the night beside you," I pointed out. "Seems a bit late for such formalities." A low chuckle escaped him, the sound warming the space between us. "Gabriel," he said after a moment. "You may call me Gabriel." The name didn't suit him somehow, too gentle, too human for the creature before me, but I nodded, accepting this small victory. "And you?" he asked. "What shall I call you besides little human?" "Emma," I replied. "Emma Hayes." His expression shifted at my surname, something like pain flashing briefly in his eyes. "Hayes," he repeated softly. "Of course." He moved toward the bed, pulling back the furs and linens. "Come," he said, his tone making it clear this was a command, not an invitation. My feet seemed frozen to the floor, unwilling to carry me toward what felt like doom. Gabriel watched me, his amber eyes glowing in the dim light. "Your heart races," he observed. "I can hear it from here." "But fear will only make this harder, Emma Hayes." The use of my name startled me. There was something in the way he said it, a familiarity, an intimacy, that sent a shiver down my spine. I forced myself forward, one step and then another, until I reached the side of the bed opposite him. The mattress looked impossibly soft, the furs inviting despite the danger they represented. "Lie down," Gabriel instructed, his voice low, "and try to calm yourself. Your heart cannot sustain that rhythm all night." I slipped beneath the covers, keeping to the very edge of the mattress, as far from him as possible. The bed dipped as he joined me, his weight and heat immediately apparent even across the distance I'd tried to maintain. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said unexpectedly, staring up at the ceiling. The request caught me off guard. "Why? Curiosity," he replied. "And distraction. Focus on something besides your fear, and you might survive until morning." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "She raised me after my parents died. She was strong, independent. She lived in a cabin in the woods, grew her own food, needed no one. And yet she wore the mark of the guardians, Gabriel mused. A protector, then. I suppose, I said, memories washing over me. She taught me things other children didn't learn. How to track animals, which plants could heal or harm. How to move silently through the forest. Useful skills, he observed, especially for one living near wolf territory. A thought occurred to me then, so sudden and obvious I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it before. She knew, I whispered. About your kind. That's why she gave me the pendant, why she taught me those things. Gabriel turned his head to look at me, his amber eyes reflecting the firelight. Perhaps she did more than know of us, he said quietly. Perhaps she knew us. The implication hung in the air between us, too enormous to grasp fully. Had my grandmother, the woman who raised me, who shaped me, been connected to these creatures? Had she been a guardian, as Gabriel called them? That's impossible, I said. Though uncertainty crept into my voice. She would have told me. Would she? Gabriel challenged. Would you have believed her? Or would you have thought her mad, spinning tales of werewolves and ancient pacts? He had a point. Even now, lying beside a werewolf king, part of me struggled to accept the reality of my situation. How much harder would it have been to believe without proof? Rest now, Gabriel said, his voice softening. The night grows deeper, and dawn is still far away. He reached over, his fingers brushing a strand of blonde hair from my face. The contact was brief, but electric, sending a jolt through my system that had nothing to do with fear. Remember, he said, his eyes holding mine. Silver protects, but wisdom saves. My grandmother's words, from his lips. The implications spun in my mind as darkness claimed me, pulling me under despite every instinct screaming to remain alert. My last conscious thought was that the true test might not be surviving a night in the Alpha King's bed, but surviving the truths that awaited me at dawn. I dreamed of wolves. They ran through moonlit forests, their silver and black forms weaving between ancient trees. I was among them, but not one of them. Human yet somehow accepted, keeping pace despite my frailer form. At the head of the pack ran a massive black wolf, its movements fluid and powerful. It glanced back at me with amber eyes that burned with intelligence, and something more profound, more painful. Gabriel. The dream shifted. I stood in my grandmother's cabin, snow falling softly outside the frosted windows. Eleanor sat in her rocking chair by the fire, her fingers working deftly at some intricate piece of needlework. She looked younger than I remembered, her blonde hair, so like my own, untouched by gray. You found him, she said without looking up. I didn't find anyone, I protested. I was taken. She smiled, the expression tinged with sadness. Some fates find us, no matter how we try to avoid them. Her fingers stilled, and she finally raised her eyes to mine. He was different once, before grief hardened him, before betrayal taught him to trust nothing but power. Who was he to you? I asked, the question burning in my throat, but the cabin was dissolving around us, my grandmother's form becoming transparent, insubstantial. Silver protects, she whispered as she faded, but only love saves. I woke with a gasp, disoriented in the unfamiliar darkness. The fire had burned low, casting the chamber in shadows broken only by moonlight streaming through the windows. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was, and then it all came rushing back. The Alpha King. The bargain. The night I had to survive. Gabriel. I turned my head slowly, expecting to find him beside me. The bed was empty, the furs rumpled where he had lain. Relief washed through me, followed immediately by a spike of anxiety. Where had he gone? Did his absence mean our bargain was void? A movement by the windows caught my eye. Gabriel stood there, a dark silhouette against the night sky. His back was to me, shoulders tense, hands braced against the stone wall as if physically restraining himself. Even from across the room, I could sense something was wrong. Gabriel? I whispered, pushing myself up on my elbows. He didn't turn, but his head tilted slightly, acknowledging that he'd heard me. Go back to sleep, he said, his voice rougher than before, almost a growl. I should have obeyed. Every instinct for self-preservation screamed at me to lie down, to close my eyes, to make myself as small and unnoticeable as possible. Instead, I found myself slipping from the bed, the stone floor cold beneath my bare feet, as I approached him cautiously. "What's happening?" I asked, stopping several paces away. He made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a snarl. "The test is working as intended." His knuckles whitened as he gripped the wall harder. "Your proximity affects me, as mine affects you." I took another step closer, drawn by something I couldn't name. "Affects you how?" He turned then, and I nearly stumbled backward. His eyes had changed, the amber now blazing gold, pupils elongated like a wolf's. His canines had lengthened, pressing against his lower lip as he spoke. "The wolf wants out," he said, his voice deeper, resonating in my chest. "And your scent isn't helping matters." Fear surged through me, but beneath it was something else, a curiosity that overrode common sense. "My scent?" Gabriel inhaled deeply, his eyes closing briefly. "Honeysuckle and sunshine," he murmured. "And something older, something in your blood that calls to mine." He opened his eyes, fixing me with that unnerving golden gaze. "You should be afraid," he said. "Most humans would be running by now." "I am afraid," I admitted. "But I've nowhere to run." A smile curved his lips, revealing more of those elongated canines. "Practical. Your grandmother was the same." The mention of Eleanor jolted me. "You knew her," I said. Not a question this time, but a statement of fact. "In my dream just now, she spoke of you. She said you were different once, before grief hardened you." Gabriel's expression shifted, the wolf features receding slightly as shock replaced predatory focus. "You dreamed of her?" I nodded, taking another step forward, closing the distance between us to mere feet. "She was working on her needlework by the fire, just as she always did. She told me that some fates find us no matter how we try to avoid them." Something raw and vulnerable flashed across Gabriel's face, so at odds with the power he exuded that it stopped me in my tracks. For a moment, I glimpsed the man beneath the monster, the wound beneath the scar. "Eleanor," he whispered, the name carrying a weight of history I couldn't begin to comprehend. "Always the wiser of us. Who was she to you?" I asked again, the question from my dream escaping into reality. Gabriel turned away, moving to the hearth where he stirred the embers back to life. The renewed flames cast his features in sharp relief, highlighting the tension in his jaw. "She was to be my mate," he said finally, the words falling into the silence like stones. "Before the great betrayal, before your kind slaughtered half my pack and drove us into the mountains." The revelation hit me with physical force. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "That's impossible," I whispered. "My grandmother was human." "Yes," Gabriel agreed, his back still to me. "A guardian, sworn to protect the secret of our existence, to maintain the balance between our kinds." He laughed bitterly, "until her brother decided that power over wolves was preferable to peace with them." My mind reeled, struggling to reconcile this history with the grandmother I had known, the quiet woman who had raised me with firm kindness, who had taught me to respect the forest and its creatures, who had warned me never to stray from marked paths in the mountains. "She wouldn't have betrayed you," I said, certainty blooming within me despite the impossibility of what I was hearing. Gabriel turned, his eyes once again amber rather than gold, though no less intense. "No," he agreed softly. "She wouldn't. And she didn't." "Then why—" "Because I believed she had," he interrupted, his voice rough with old pain. "Because all evidence pointed to her involvement. Because I was young and wounded and furious, and it was easier to believe all humans were treacherous than to consider I might have been wrong." He crossed the room to a cabinet I hadn't noticed before, withdrawing a small wooden box. When he returned to me, he placed it in my hands, a weight disproportionate to its size. "Open it," he instructed. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, lay a pendant identical to the one around my neck, the mark of the guardians, as Gabriel had called it. Beside it was a yellowed envelope, my grandmother's name written across it in a bold, masculine hand. I wrote that the day she left, Gabriel said, watching me closely. The day I banished all humans from our territory, even her. He swallowed hard. Especially her. You loved her, I realized, looking up to meet his gaze. Pain flashed across his features. Wolves mate for life, Emma, even when separated, even when betrayed. He gestured to the box. I've carried that for 50 years, unable to part with it, unable to deliver it. 50 years. The number echoed in my mind, impossible yet undeniable. Gabriel appeared no older than 30, his face unlined, his body in its prime. Yet if he had known my grandmother in her youth— "How old are you?" I whispered. "Old enough to have learned that vengeance brings no peace," he replied, sinking onto the bed beside me, careful to maintain distance between us. Young enough to still feel the sting of mistakes made in anger. I touched the pendant in the box, then the identical one around my neck. "She never told me any of this. Would you have believed her?" Gabriel asked again, echoing his earlier question. "Or would you have thought the grief had finally broken her mind?" He had a point. Even now, sitting beside him, holding physical evidence of a connection between my grandmother and this werewolf king, part of me struggled to accept the reality before me. "She sent you here," Gabriel said suddenly, his eyes widening with realization. "The hiking trail you followed, it doesn't exist. Not on any human map." A chill ran down my spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Eleanor Hayes was many things, but never careless," he replied. "If you crossed into my territory, it's because she meant for you to find me." The implication settled over me like a physical weight. Had my grandmother orchestrated this entire encounter from beyond the grave? Had her teachings, her gift of the pendant, all been preparation for this moment? "Why would she do that?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Gabriel's eyes searched mine, looking for something I couldn't name. Perhaps she believed enough time had passed. Perhaps she hoped I had learned wisdom in her absence. His hand lifted, hovering near my cheek without touching. "Or perhaps she knew what I would see when I looked at you." My pulse quickened. "And what do you see?" "Her strength," he said softly. "Her defiance, her compassion, even in the face of death." His hand finally made contact, fingers brushing my cheek with unexpected gentleness. "But also something entirely your own, something that calls to me in ways I don't fully understand." The touch sent heat flooding through me, so at odds with the fear that had defined our earlier interactions that I gasped. Gabriel's eyes darkened at the sound, his hand drawing back as if burned. "The night grows late," he said, his voice strained. "You should rest while you can." But sleep felt impossible now, with revelations swirling in my mind and Gabriel's presence beside me a palpable force. "I don't think I can," I admitted. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, I suppose not." He rose, moving to retrieve something from one of the bookshelves. When he returned, he held a leather-bound volume that looked ancient, its pages yellowed with age. "Then perhaps you'd like to learn about your heritage instead." He opened the book carefully, revealing pages covered in an elegant script, interspersed with intricate drawings. Wolves in various forms, humans bearing pendants like mine, symbols I didn't recognize, but that seemed vaguely familiar. "The history of the Guardians," Gabriel explained, "written by my grandfather when the pact was first formed." He turned the book so I could see better. "Your bloodline is mentioned here. The Hayes family. One of the first to pledge protection to the wolves in exchange for our protection of their lands." I traced the flowing script with my fingertip, a strange sense of recognition stirring within me. "All this time," I murmured. "All these stories, this history, and she never told me." "She was protecting you," Gabriel said, "as guardians always protect what they love, even at great cost to themselves." I looked up at him, struck by the weight of sorrow in his voice. "What happened between you? The full truth." Gabriel closed the book, setting it aside. For a long moment, he was silent, his gaze fixed on the fire as if seeing events from long ago playing out in the flames. "We were young," he began finally. "I had just become alpha after my father's death. Eleanor was the daughter of the guardian chieftain. brilliant, fearless, utterly devoted to maintaining peace between our kinds. A smile touched his lips at the memory. She challenged me constantly, refusing to be intimidated by what I was. We fell in love despite every tradition that warned against it. His expression darkened. Then came the night of blood. Hunters entered our territory, armed with silver weapons and led by someone who knew our weaknesses, our hiding places. Half my pack was slaughtered before we could mount a defense. The pain in his voice was so raw, so present, that I could almost see the carnage he described, feel the rage and grief that must have consumed him. Eleanor's brother James was found among the dead hunters, Gabriel continued, and the attacks had come from the direction of the Guardian settlement. All evidence pointed to betrayal. But you said she didn't betray you, I reminded him softly. No, he agreed. Years later, we discovered the truth. James had been manipulated by a rival pack seeking to destroy the alliance between wolves and guardians. They wanted humans to fear us, to hunt us. It made their own power plays easier if we were weakened and isolated. He reached for the wooden box again, removing the yellowed envelope. By then, it was too late. I had banished Eleanor, broken our bond, cursed her name before the pack, and she, proud as she was wounded, had gone. His fingers traced her name on the envelope. I tried to find her afterward, to make amends, but she had disappeared completely. Until now. My heart ached for both of them, for the love destroyed by manipulation and pride, for the decades of separation that could never be reclaimed. She never stopped loving you, I said with certainty. She spoke of a great loss, a wound that never healed. I always thought she meant my grandfather, but there was no grandfather, was there? Gabriel asked quietly. I shook my head. My mother was adopted. Eleanor never married. Something shifted in Gabriel's expression. Pain giving way to a different emotion. One I couldn't quite identify. 50 years, he murmured. 50 years of carrying this wound, believing I was alone in my suffering. He looked at me with new intensity. And now you appear, wearing her pendant, crossing boundaries only she would know how to find. Bringing you her forgiveness, I said, understanding dawning. That's why she sent me. To show you that despite everything, she forgave you. Gabriel's composure broke then, a shudder passing through his powerful frame. In that moment, he looked not like an alpha king, but like a man who had carried grief for too long, who had governed his loneliness with iron control until it threatened to crack him open from within. Without thinking, I reached for him, my hand covering his. She would want you to forgive yourself too. His fingers closed around mine, the heat of his skin searing. How can you be certain? He asked, his voice barely audible. You never knew the truth about her. I knew her heart, I replied simply, and it was full of love, not bitterness. She taught me that holding on to anger only poisons yourself. I squeezed his hand gently. She sent me here to show you that. Gabriel's eyes met mine. Amber depths filled with a vulnerability I never would have expected from this predator who had terrorized me mere hours ago. Perhaps, he conceded. Or perhaps she sent you for reasons neither of us fully understand yet. Outside, the night had begun to soften, the deepest darkness giving way to the first hint of pre-dawn. I had survived most of the night in the Alpha King's presence, a feat he had claimed was nearly impossible for humans. Yet here I sat, holding his hand, feeling not the drain of life he had warned of, but a strange, growing warmth. The sun will rise soon, Gabriel observed, his gaze moving to the windows. You've endured longer than I expected. Does that mean I've passed your test? I asked. That I'm free to go? His hand tightened briefly around mine before releasing it. Yes, he said, rising from the bed and moving away, his back to me once more. When dawn breaks, you're free to return to your world. As promised. The words should have brought relief. Instead, they left me with an unexpected hollow feeling in my chest. I had survived the night, won my freedom. Yet suddenly, leaving felt like losing something I hadn't known I wanted to keep. Dawn approached with quiet inevitability, the darkness beyond the windows gradually yielding to a pearlescent glow. I stood at the glass, watching as the mountains emerged from shadow, their snow-covered peaks catching the first hints of sunlight. Behind me, Gabriel moved about the chamber, his restless energy palpable in the silence between us. I had survived the night, won my freedom. In mere minutes, I would walk away from this stronghold, this alpha king, this unexpected connection to my grandmother's past. The victory felt strangely hollow. "Your pack will escort you to the border," Gabriel said, his voice carefully neutral. He had dressed while I watched the sunrise. Once again the imposing figure I had first encountered, though I now saw the man beneath the mantle of power. "You'll be given provisions for the journey back to your home." "Thank you," I replied automatically, the words inadequate for the tumult of emotions churning within me. He approached, stopping several feet away as if unwilling to breach the invisible barrier between us. "The pendant," he said, gesturing to my grandmother's silver mark that still hung around my neck. "Keep it close. It identifies you as under my protection should you ever encounter wolves again." "I will," I promised, touching it reflexively. "Though I don't plan to make a habit of wandering into wolf territory," a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Perhaps not. But some fates find us regardless of our plans." My grandmother's words from my dream. The coincidence sent a shiver through me. "Gabriel," I began, uncertain what I wanted to say, but knowing I couldn't leave without saying something. A sharp knock at the door interrupted me. Gabriel's expression shuddered immediately, the vulnerability of the night vanishing behind a mask of authority. "Enter," he commanded. The door opened to reveal Celine, the silver-haired woman from the previous evening. Her eyes widened fractionally at the sight of me. Alive, unharmed, standing freely in her alpha's presence, she recovered quickly, bowing her head in deference. "My king, forgive the interruption. The northern delegation is preparing to depart and requests a final audience." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Tell them I'll meet with them shortly." Celine hesitated, her gaze flickering between us. "There's something else," she said, her voice lowering. "Our scouts report movement at the eastern border. Hunters." The word fell like a stone into still water, ripples of tension expanding outward. Gabriel's posture changed instantly, predatory alertness replacing regal composure. "How many?" he demanded. "At least 20. They're armed with silver and appear to know our patrol patterns." Celine's eyes moved to me, suspicion evident in her gaze. They arrived shortly after she did. The accusation hung in the air between us. My heart raced as Gabriel turned to me, his amber eyes searching my face. "I had nothing to do with this," I said, the words tumbling out in desperate sincerity. "I swear it. I came alone. I told no one where I was going. For a long, terrible moment, I thought he wouldn't believe me, that history would repeat itself, that he would see betrayal where there was none. Then something shifted in his expression, resolve hardening his features. "I believe you," he said simply, the 3 words carrying a weight that made my knees weak with relief. He turned back to Celine. "Gather the warriors. Full defensive positions. No one engages until I give the command." She bowed again, deeper this time. "Yes, my king." Her eyes flickered to me once more before she departed, closing the door behind her. Gabriel moved to a chest near the wall, throwing it open to reveal weapons. A sword with ancient runes etched into the blade, daggers of various sizes, what looked like armor made of some dark, flexible material. "You need to go," he said without looking at me, beginning to strap the weapons to his body with practiced efficiency. "Celine will show you a path through the northern woods. It's longer, but safer." I stood frozen, watching as he transformed before my eyes, not into a wolf, but into a warrior prepared for battle. "Who are they?" I asked. "These hunters?" "Enemies of my kind," he replied grimly. "Those who fear what they don't understand, and destroy what they fear." He fastened the sword to his back. "They come every few years, testing our defenses, seeking weaknesses, but never in such numbers, never so coordinated." A terrible suspicion bloomed in my mind. "Unless they had inside information," I said slowly. "Unless someone told them exactly when your attention would be divided." Gabriel paused, turning to face me. "What are you saying?" "The northern delegation arriving early, the hunters appearing at the same time." I took a step toward him, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. "What if it's happening again? What if someone is manipulating events?" just like they did with my grandmother. His eyes narrowed, considering. The Northern Pack has always resented my leadership, my attempts at diplomacy with humans. And if they could provoke an attack, make it seem like humans violated the peace, I trailed off, the implications clear. They could push for war, Gabriel finished, a muscle working in his jaw. History repeating itself, the weight of the past hung heavy between us. The blood spilled, the lives lost, the love destroyed by similar machinations 50 years ago. I thought of my grandmother, sending me here with her pendant, perhaps knowing that the cycle was beginning again. I should go with you, I said suddenly, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. Gabriel shook his head sharply. Absolutely not. These hunters won't distinguish between wolves and human allies. You'd be in as much danger as any of my pack. But that's exactly why I should go, I insisted, moving closer to him. I'm human. I can speak to them, maybe make them listen. If they're being manipulated, they deserve to know the truth. And if they're not, he challenged, if they're simply killers who hate what we are, I touched the pendant at my throat, drawing strength from its familiar weight. Then I still stand with you, as a guardian should. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, respect, and something deeper I couldn't name. You're not a guardian, Emma. You didn't choose this life, this duty. My grandmother did, I countered. And she sent me to you for a reason. Maybe this is it, not just to deliver forgiveness, but to prevent the same tragedy from happening again. Gabriel studied me intently, as if seeing me truly for the first time. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken possibility. You could die, he said bluntly. So could you, I replied. A reluctant smile curved his lips. I'm harder to kill. Then protect me, I challenged. Isn't that what the pact was about? Wolves and guardians protecting each other? He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek in a touch so gentle it belied the strength I knew he possessed. You're as stubborn as she was, he murmured, the words holding a complex mixture of pain and admiration. Before I could respond, the fortress shook with a distant explosion. Gabriel's hand dropped away, his expression shifting to one of cold fury. It's begun, he said, moving swiftly to the door. He paused, looking back at me. Stay close. Do exactly as I say. If I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. I nodded, pulse racing with a mixture of fear and determination. I understand. The corridors of the stronghold had transformed in the hours since I'd been brought through them. Where before there had been stillness and silence, now there was organized chaos. Wolves in various states of transformation, rushing to defensive positions. Weapons being distributed, orders shouted in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood on a primal level. Gabriel moved through it all like the epicenter of a storm, his presence commanding immediate respect and obedience. Wolves parted before him, many casting curious or hostile glances at me as I followed in his wake. I kept my chin high, my grandmother's pendant displayed prominently at my throat. We emerged onto a wide stone balcony overlooking the main courtyard of the stronghold. Below, dozens of wolves had assembled, some in human form, others as massive wolves, still others caught in the unsettling half-state between. At the far end of the courtyard, the massive gates showed signs of damage, as if something had tried to breach them from outside. Celine appeared at Gabriel's side, her expression grim. They've brought explosives this time, she reported, and some new weapon, silver projectiles, fired from a distance. Casualties? Gabriel demanded. 3 wounded, none fatal yet. Her eyes flicked to me. Why is she still here? Before Gabriel could answer, a voice called up from the courtyard, deep, resonant, and filled with barely contained rage. Gabriel, face me, you traitor to our kind. The assembled wolves parted, revealing a tall figure striding through their midst. He wore the furs and insignia of the Northern Pack, his hair white blonde, his eyes a cold blue that seemed to burn even from a distance. At his command, 4 wolves in human form dragged forward a 5th figure, bloodied, barely conscious, but still recognizably human. One of the hunters, Gabriel murmured, his voice tight with controlled fury. The northern wolf looked up, his gaze finding mine with unerring precision. A smile spread across his face, cruel and satisfied. "So the rumors are true," he called. "The great Alpha King keeps a human pet, just like your father before you." He yanked the injured hunter to his knees. "We caught this one trying to scale the eastern wall. There are more outside, demanding we release their companion, and you." "Demanding me?" Gabriel's voice remained calm, though I could feel the tension radiating from him. "Oh yes," the northern wolf replied with malicious pleasure. "They seem to think you've taken one of their own, a female who wandered into our territory. They're quite insistent on her return." My blood ran cold. The hunters hadn't come randomly. They'd come for me, but how had they known I was here? I hadn't told anyone where I was hiking, hadn't even planned to come this far into the mountains. "Interesting timing, Alaric," Gabriel observed, his use of the northern wolf's name deliberate and pointed. "Your delegation arrives early, and suddenly hunters appear at our borders, searching for a specific human." Alaric's smile never faltered. "Unfortunate coincidence. There are no coincidences in wolf politics," Gabriel replied, his voice hardening. "Only plots and counterplots." He straightened to his full height, addressing not just Alaric, but all assembled. 50 years ago, our peace with the Guardians was destroyed by manipulation and lies. Half our pack slaughtered because someone wanted war rather than coexistence. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Many of the older wolves nodded grimly, while younger ones looked confused or skeptical. "Ancient history," Alaric dismissed with a wave of his hand. "What matters is now. Humans at our gates with silver weapons, threatening our territory. Humans who somehow knew exactly where to find us," Gabriel countered. "Who knew a specific human was here. Information few possess." Doubt flickered across some faces in the crowd. Alaric's expression darkened. "You accuse me of collaborating with humans?" he snarled, his control slipping to reveal the beast beneath. "I, who have always argued that they should be driven from our lands entirely?" "Yes," Gabriel said simply. "Because war with humans would give you the pretext needed to challenge my leadership, to claim I've made us weak with my policies of selective tolerance." The accusation hung in the air, tension building like the pressure before a storm. I watched Alaric carefully, saw the calculation in his eyes as he weighed responses. It happened in an instant. Alaric lunged forward, hauling the injured hunter up by his throat. "Perhaps we should give them what they want," he growled. "This one for your human pet. A fair exchange." The hunter's eyes bulged as Alaric's claws dug into his neck. Without thinking, I stepped forward to the edge of the balcony. "Stop," I called, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent courtyard. "He's not part of this. He's being used. Just like you're trying to use Gabriel." All eyes turned to me, some curious, some hostile, all surprised at my boldness. Gabriel's hand closed around my arm in warning, but I shook him off gently. "I am Emma Hayes," I announced, touching my pendant so all could see it. "Granddaughter of Eleanor Hayes, guardian of the eastern boundaries. I came here alone, following a path only guardians know." I fixed my gaze on Alaric. "Someone told those hunters I was here. Someone who wants to destroy the peace my grandmother and Gabriel's ancestors built." Alaric's face contorted with rage. "The word of a human means nothing here." "The word of a guardian once meant everything," came a new voice. Celine stepped forward, removing something from around her neck, a pendant identical to mine. Gasps echoed through the courtyard. "My mother was a guardian," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hand. "She told me how the peace was broken, how someone fed information to hunters 50 years ago." Her eyes hardened as she looked at Alaric. "Someone whose father rose to power in the aftermath." Understanding dawned on me with sickening clarity. The plot that had separated Gabriel and my grandmother hadn't just been about destroying peace between species. It had been about power within the packs themselves. "This is absurd," Alaric snarled, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Gabriel's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with mine in full view of his assembled pack. The gesture was both support and declaration. "Release the hunter," he commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. "And then you will submit to questioning under the old laws, with Silver and Moonstone to ensure truth." Panic flashed across Alaric's face. "You have no right." "I have every right," Gabriel cut him off. "As Alpha King, and as one who has seen this pattern before. His grip on my hand tightened. I lost everything once to such manipulation. I will not allow it again. Something shifted in the atmosphere of the courtyard. A turning of sentiment, a recognition of truth. Wolves who had been watching with hostility now looked at Alaric with suspicion, at Gabriel with renewed respect. Alaric sensed it too. His control slipped further, features beginning to shift as rage overtook calculation. With a roar that was more animal than human, he flung the injured hunter aside and launched himself toward the balcony, toward us. Gabriel moved with impossible speed, pushing me behind him as he met Alaric's charge. The two collided with bone-jarring force, tumbling over the balcony edge to the courtyard below. Wolves scattered as the alphas crashed to the ground, already shifting, clothes tearing as human forms gave way to massive wolves. One midnight black, one silver white. They circled each other, hackles raised, teeth bared in snarls that echoed off the stone walls. This was no ceremonial challenge, no test of dominance. This was a fight to the death, ancient and primal. Alaric struck first, lunging for Gabriel's throat with snapping jaws. Gabriel twisted aside, countering with a bite that tore into Alaric's shoulder. Blood darkened silver fur as they separated, circling again. I watched in horror and fascination, unable to look away as the wolves clashed again and again. Gabriel fought with controlled precision, each movement calculated despite the savagery of the battle. Alaric was all fury and strength, his attacks growing more desperate as Gabriel evaded his most lethal lunges. Blood matted Gabriel's black fur from a deep gash along his flank. Alaric limped, one foreleg clearly injured. Both were tiring, the ferocity of their combat taking its toll. In the periphery of my awareness, I noticed Selene organizing wolves to secure Alaric's companions from the northern delegation. The injured hunter was being tended to, his wounds bandaged despite his fearful struggles. My attention snapped back to the fight as Alaric launched a desperate attack, jaws clamping onto Gabriel's leg with crushing force. Gabriel howled in pain, but twisted to sink his own teeth into Alaric's exposed neck. They rolled across the courtyard in a blur of black and silver, snarls giving way to higher yelps of pain. When they separated, Gabriel staggered, favoring his injured leg. Alaric circled, blood streaming from his neck, but his blue eyes still burning with hatred. He gathered himself for a final, desperate lunge. In that moment, clarity struck me with the force of revelation. My hand closed around the silver pendant at my throat, the symbol of guardians, of the pact between our kinds. "Silver protects," my grandmother had said, "but wisdom saves." Without hesitation, I pulled the chain over my head and threw it with all my strength. The pendant arced through the air, landing directly in Alaric's path as he charged. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Silver against werewolf skin, the one vulnerability they couldn't overcome. Alaric howled in agony as his paw touched the pendant, stumbling, his charge faltering at the critical moment. Gabriel saw the opening and took it. His massive black form slammed into Alaric's exposed side, jaws closing around the white wolf's throat in the killing hold of an alpha. There was a terrible moment of struggle, of choked growls and thrashing limbs, and then stillness. The courtyard fell silent. Gabriel released his grip, stepping back from Alaric's motionless form. Before the assembled pack, he lifted his head and released a howl that seemed to shake the very stones of the stronghold. A sound of victory, of justice, of a cycle broken. One by one, the other wolves joined him, their voices rising in acknowledgement of their alpha's triumph. Even in human form, I felt the pull of that call, something ancient in my blood responding to the primal chorus. As the howls faded, Gabriel shifted back to human form, heedless of his nakedness or his wounds. Selene hurried forward with a cloak, which he wrapped around himself before turning to look up at where I still stood on the balcony. Our eyes met across the distance, and in that moment, something passed between us. An understanding, a recognition, a possibility I hadn't dared acknowledge until now. I made my way down to the courtyard, wolves parting silently to let me pass. When I reached Gabriel, I saw the full extent of his injuries. Deep gashes that would have killed a human, but were already beginning to heal on his supernatural flesh. "You saved me," he said quietly, his amber eyes searching mine. "You would have won anyway," I replied, though we both knew that wasn't certain, perhaps. A smile touched his lips, but it seems guardians are still protecting wolves after all. Around us, the fortress was returning to order. The injured were being tended to, Alaric's body removed, the northern wolves who hadn't sided with him held under guard. Through it all, Gabriel remained focused solely on me, as if I were the only constant in a shifting world. Dawn has passed, I observed, glancing at the sunlight now fully illuminating the courtyard. I survived the night. Yes, he agreed. You're free to go, as promised. The words hung between us, heavy with all they didn't say. I thought of my small apartment in the city, my quiet job, the ordinary life that awaited my return. Then I looked at Gabriel, at the power and loneliness of his existence, at the weight of history he carried, at the connection that had brought us together despite impossible odds. What if I don't want to go? I asked softly. Something kindled in his eyes, hope, carefully restrained. The life of a guardian isn't easy, he warned, especially one connected to an alpha king. I'm my grandmother's granddaughter, I reminded him. I've never been interested in easy. His hand rose to cup my cheek, the gesture achingly tender from one capable of such violence. There's much you don't know yet, about guardians, about wolves, about what it would mean to stay. Then teach me, I challenged. Show me this world she kept hidden. Let me make my own choice, with open eyes. Beyond the fortress walls, I knew the hunters still waited, humans who didn't understand, who feared what was different. Beyond them lay my former life, safe and predictable, and utterly ordinary. But here, in this ancient stronghold high in the mountains, stood a path my grandmother had perhaps always known I would find. A legacy of protection and courage, of standing between worlds, of finding strength in what others saw as weakness. Gabriel's amber eyes held mine, centuries of loneliness giving way to cautious hope. And if you choose to stay, what then, Emma Hayes? I reached up, covering his hand with mine where it still rested against my cheek. Then I become what I was perhaps always meant to be, a guardian in more than just blood, a bridge between your world and mine. I smiled, feeling a certainty I'd never known before. And perhaps, in time, something more. The sun rose higher over the mountains, gilding the stronghold in light that chased away the shadows of the night. I had survived darkness in the Alpha King's bed. Not just the physical night, but the darker legacy of misunderstanding and betrayal that had separated our kinds for generations. What awaited in the light was unwritten, uncertain, potentially dangerous. But as Gabriel's fingers intertwined with mine, I knew with bone-deep certainty that whatever came next, we would face it as my grandmother, and he should have, together. Stronger for our differences, healing wounds that had festered for far too long. Silver protects, but love saves. In the end, my grandmother had been right all along.